Greetings, everybody, for the week of September 9th, the week starting with September 7th, 2025, and this will be, and this is also covering some of the events of the previous weeks that I haven't covered yet. So this one is going to be on the main dominant story of the past couple of days and weeks, other than the Epstein thing that's going on, which I have already spoken at length on that, and I don't feel the need to do it again. That is working its way through the body politic in the way that I expected, and it's frankly ripping apart the MAGA movement more than I expected. I guess I'll do a little bit of a big picture update on what's going on. It is ripping apart the MAGA movement a little bit more than I expected it to, but I expected that. I didn't expect that the MAGA movement would break apart at all until they already had an alternative that was something that they would be willing to live the rest of their lives for, that they would be willing to commit. And anyway, it's a difficult topic to talk about without getting demonetized, but yeah, that is what drove and drives, a lot of the MAGA movement for the past 10 years, with increasing tempo over the years, has been their desire to end their misery in the easy way. And I figured that that there would be nobody really that would leave the MAGA movement until that took place, and about 10% of the entire electorate so far, maybe 5 or 7, but a certain amount of people since the release of the Epstein files has left the MAGA movement, which is more like 20 to 30% of the Republicans, of the Trump voters. It's not insignificant at all. And this has happened over a certain amount of time. It's kind of been stalling out recently. But if you look at the polling on Epstein and the way it's being handled, another 30 or so percent of Republican voters, in addition to the ones who have already stopped answering yes on their approval rating questions, about another 30% or so of Republican voters have said specifically that they don't like the way the Epstein files have been handled. And what that signals to me is that if they were offered something that, for them, and this is not necessarily politically easy to do this work, but I'm sure that there are people out there that can do it. And James Talrico, Raphael Warnock, and a bunch of other people of the new populist version of the Blue Dogs, not the old one, but the new one, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. Shame on her for some of her willingness to be soft in the face of Trump, but in terms of her actual policies, I love them, and I think that she has a lot of promise. These people, they're willing to leave. They would be willing to leave if something was offered to them. And I'm just throwing out names here of people that could do it. I mean, I know that I'm pretty sure that I have some of the skills and rhetorical ability that I could do it as well, with a little bit more help from you. So feel free to like and subscribe and spread this to your friends, but that's a ways away. Somebody with a talent and an understanding of this movement and really watching my longer form video on Epstein would help. I would recommend it for anybody that's trying to figure out how to win in strongly Republican districts where you wouldn't be able to win otherwise. For instance, if they were offered something that they were willing to stay here on Earth for, rather than do what they're doing now, I think that 30% that we haven't won over yet would be willing to come over, or at least many of them. And that would reduce Trump's approval rating to below 20%. It would reduce the approval rating of his lackeys, most of them, to below 20%. It would be incredibly helpful if we were able to do that. So that's what's been happening on the Epstein front over the past month or so. We've already gotten a lot of people, which I didn't expect, and many more would come if we were willing to offer them something. So, for instance, in one of our public health bills, we could offer various disincentives, various taxes that would force the pornography industry to pay some of the cost of what they've helped create, and of the mental health damage that they've helped create. We could include that in a future health bill, universal health care bill. So there are things that we could do like that could win those people over. And if we were willing to do this for them, this Epstein thing right here could be the silver bullet that makes so many people come over to our side that it's just a joke for them to try to do any kind of authoritarian takeover in this country. If we're able to use it well, this Epstein thing is good. And the Democrats are doing very well defensively on Epstein. They're doing very well day to day by pushing it, but they're not going at the root issue, and they're not really willing to make any policy or propose any policy yet. And it's not particularly promising, but I'm glad they at least recognize what a big deal this is, what a wedge issue this is. And then there's a lot of, and by the way, when it comes to the polling data of approval ratings themselves, I know a lot of the other polling data I trust more, but when it comes to the polling data of approval ratings, I don't really trust that those numbers are actually where they are. I trust the way that they move over time, generally, and they've been falling in every major index for a while. But they haven't been, for instance, I remember back in the first 2 weeks or so, which I trust those polls much more because it was before there was all of this chilling effect going out from the administration. They weren't moving quickly enough in those critical early first weeks for an authoritarian takeover, which is why they haven't already succeeded. It's why people like me are still on the internet today. What happened, I think, around the 2 or 3 week mark, for no reason at all, there started being surges of, and even retractions. I believe that there were retractions of a bunch of the polls that had dropped down into the 40s almost immediately, within the first month, they climbed back up again, or the data was simply ignored by the press completely, and that they were initially looking at. He came in with about 40, maybe he actually peaked above 50% for the only time in any of his presidential terms. I mean, he's not legally qualified under the 14th Amendment. But in any of the time that he's physically been in the White House, that was the most popular he had been. But it just started falling like a rock almost immediately. And so I don't trust these polling numbers in general. I don't trust them. I think that I trust the way that they move. But I think that they're probably, based on what I saw at the beginning, they're probably about 5 to 10 points too high. So the current polling has us around 40%, which is about where he was, maybe a point or two lower than where he was in like February 15th of this year. And given the amount that his popularity has dropped since then, based on what we've actually seen, including Epstein and a bunch of other scandals, and the tariffs and everything like that, what we have seen is that his actual popularity numbers are much lower than they were then, and so either those numbers were unrealistic, which I doubt, or more likely the polling formulae have been adjusted by people who have been obeying in advance. So in general, and this is not with any of the other polls, like I believe the 80% of Americans don't like the Epstein Files poll, but on the top line approval rating, I think that it's somewhere in the 30s right now. And we could certainly drive it down to 19 if we were willing to give his voters something that was worth staying on this earth for. And so, for all you coming in right now, we're going to move on from this Epstein thing to the main issue, which is the Supreme Court. This is something Ezra Klein introduced me to, is the Supreme Court. And that's hence the title of this video, Supreme Court Always Chickens Out. But they haven't been chickening out enough. And they have been, in their delay tactics, they've been really helping this regime, the self-proclaimed administration, a lot. And putting this country in serious danger. This is exactly what Donald Trump wanted when he did what he did, or probably Stephen Miller with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, to show the powerlessness of the court. The Supreme Court is institutionalizing that. I wouldn't say institutionalize is a hard word. They're using the shadow docket to allow him preliminarily to do a bunch of things that are facially unconstitutional. And what that means in practice is that right now, he is in a position where if he was a stronger, smarter, more agile person, he could definitely pounce on this moment and create a 20 or 30 year entrenched style of rule in which people are simply afraid to ever disobey him. He could create that if he was using this opportunity, if he was smarter about it and he was willing to pounce. But so far, most of the facially unconstitutional stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that they can do within the Constitution that is dangerous, like gutting parts of the Voting Rights Act, which could allow more gerrymandering to take place in many of the states And so there's other things. And then maybe if he was just to break statute law on election requirements, that would also be incredibly dangerous. He hasn't done any of those things yet. He's released his press release executive orders, but he's never actually, none of the officials yet have sought to do much except for harvest data, which is dangerous in its own right. But the actual nature of elections today is more or less unchanged, and they happen. We have special elections, mayoral elections, coming up soon. We have all kinds of elections still in this country. Right now, they're not as critical for the Republicans as they will be in 2026 for the MAGA movement, or whatever we want to call them, this cult of self-deletion and just despair that is currently in charge. And so there's a lot more critical for them in 2026 because there's more likelihood of an actual decisive election that changes the balance of power, probably possibly in both houses. That is something that we can push for. It's well within our reach with all the tools that we have if we were willing to use them. And I'm not so impressed so far with the Democrats, but they've been doing better than nothing. They are really... So basically all of this stuff would come down to the Supreme Court. And so far they've been behaving in a way that has allowed a lot of facially unconstitutional stuff to slide while they wait, which is something that gives power to Donald Trump today. It's not the kind of permanent power that they want, but it's power nonetheless. And it is dangerous. I would not necessarily say, and Ezra Klein, in his second video that he's made on this, where he's advocated for a government shutdown, and I totally agree, we are in a tremendous amount of danger, but Ezra Klein has said some things that are a little bit despairing towards the end, and I understand that people have despair sometimes, as long as it's not a pattern. Looking at you, what's his face? Tad Sturmer. You know who you are. And all the people that are similar to that. He's not like that. Generally, he's been somebody that has spoken more of the agency that we have than most of the internet at this point. Most of the resistance internet, to the opposition to Trump that we have. I have seen, though, I saw it towards the end of his video, he was starting to slip into despair and say, oh, maybe things are too late. And like all these people, he never actually goes into what it looks like, but I've gone into that for him, and it is completely unacceptable. We cannot accept the idea of losing our industrial civilization and ourselves, frankly, in the because I don't think we would be able to make it with the damage we've already done to the environment. It's unacceptable. But he started to tip into despair, and I would go against that aspect of it. I think that he is... I don't think that he would be... I don't think he would be competent enough, the self-proclaimed president, to be able to use this time wisely. And I don't and his allies don't seem pretty competent either. It's kind of a race between two systems that are wheezing right now, and that's why it's so kind of pathetic to watch. Because you know that if either one of them were competent, obviously we want the life affirming side, not the despair side, not the hopelessness side, to be the ones that win. But if either of them were able to get out of it, even for a second, they would easily win. But we're kind of seeing these two systems wheezing towards the finish line, and it's a question of who gets there first. But I don't think that a lot of harm is being done at this very moment. I mean, there's all of these people getting dragged off the street every day, families being separated. It's not the kind of mass deportation we would expect, but it does create a terror among Hispanic people because it's arbitrary. And I'm sure that they're going to try and push it as far as they can. It won't just be Hispanic people very soon. It will be political opponents and people like that, if they're able to get away with it and if they're able to get enough people. But what we've been seeing over about 2 months of this expanded ICE funding is that so far they haven't been able to hire that many people. It seems like they already have most of the people who would be willing to sign up for a kind of paramilitary style organization under the federal government. It seems like most of them have already signed up. It's hard to get the rest of them on board. And there's a lot more people that want to leave, actually, and pressure the heck out of them. They have a moral responsibility to leave. But they're starting to get there to the point where they want to leave. A lot of the career ICE officials from when ICE was about customs and about people moving drugs into this country, perhaps, and about people that were, and yes, about deportations, but mainly of people who were already in our prisons and things like that. When ICE was a normal agency, we can argue that it was never, it was always a mistake to create this giant DHS system, but it was a lot more of, when it was a lot more normal, there were a lot of career people that worked there, and a lot of them want to leave and may start leaving over the next couple of months. Some of them are. So the recruitment might actually go negative. And so they have a lot of money, but it's seeming to me like that money is more likely to ultimately, they're going to try to hire people and create a fighting force that can do coup d'etats and things like that, which is what Kristi Noem was normalizing a couple months ago. They're going to try to have coup d'etats to establish the capacity to do that across the country. And that is something that is utterly un-American. But they're going to try to do that. But ultimately, I think they're just going to get bored of it as it fails, and they're not able to get enough people. And I think what's going to happen, and they're already doing the age range thing, I think that it's going to get, I think that people are going to, eventually they're going to get bored with it, and they're just going to find ways of funneling most of that money to themselves in a way that's more or less harmless, other than wasting our money. So the Supreme Court, so hence the title of this video, the Supreme Court has chickened out in terms of helping Trump on facially unconstitutional issues. It's made it look like it was going to, and then pulled back at the last second. It did this with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and it is going to do this, I think, again and again. I don't think the precedents that are going to come out of this, a lot of them are going to have to, as a statement of judicial notice, just be ignored in the future. A lot of these very recent Roberts Court rulings are going to have to be ignored. But I don't think that precedents are going to get established that completely nullify the text of the entire Constitution. Parts of it have been wounded and are currently not able to operate right now, like the 14th Amendment, which says that Donald Trump is not president right now because he tried to overthrow the government. Parts of it are inoperative currently, but I don't think that it's going to be fatal to the idea of rule of law. But it could be. And they're definitely providing the best chance that they can without actually going full force and without basically without actually nullifying the Constitution. They're still chickening out at the end, but they are going out of their way to provide Trump as much of an opportunity to illegally do those kinds of things and render the Supreme Court irrelevant, ultimately, is what would happen if he was able to succeed in his overturning of the Constitution. But they're doing their best to do that, and by empowering ICE this past couple of weeks with allowing racial profiling, which is one of the examples of the shadow docket things, I don't think it's going to be allowed finally. I wouldn't put it past them, but it's pretty solid constitutionally, solidly not allowed under the Constitution, under the 14th Amendment. And so, and they've been chickening out most of the time. And they haven't been always chickening out. They have, for instance, gotten rid of the nationwide injunctions and things like that. They've been doing a lot of culture war stuff over the past couple of months that doesn't affect a lot of people, but the people that it does affect are gruesomely excluded from society. Even if you don't agree with them, you can see how plainly inhumane a lot of the stuff that they've been doing has been. But when it comes to things where it's about nullifying the text of the Constitution, they haven't done that a tremendous amount yet, but they might. And they have been doing the best that they can to gum up the works and make it harder for us to stop Donald Trump. And for that, as well as for a lot of the transparent corruption they've been engaged in, they should definitely be impeached if and when we have a majority again of pro-democracy people, a pro-democracy majority in Congress that is large enough to do impeachments, and the impeachment power actually finally works. We should definitely use it on some of those justices because a lot of them have committed crimes. And so I think that's it for today. I'm going to send you off with a little TLDR of where we are. It's not as bad as it could be. A lot of the headlines recently have been alarmist, and I haven't been having a good time in my personal life, so I really allowed myself to get sucked into that because I couldn't think about this stuff enough. But the rule of law right now, for now, as I said all the way back in April, doesn't really exist. But it might again, and the Supreme Court does chicken out, and Trump is weak, and he's demented, and we still have plenty of opportunities but they are dwindling fast, and we do have to do something. And we all have to do something. So get involved, do what you can, and I'll be seeing all of you hopefully next week sometime. I might actually have to change my fireside schedule to something else for the time being because of my coursework, but I'm going to be probably finished with that soon. So take care. God bless you all, and I hope that you are safe, that you stay safe when you go out and protest whenever the opportunities are, and we'll need, as always, some providence and some blessings. So I love you all. See you next fireside.